One way or another, Path of Exile always finds a way to get an edge over other ARPGs. And although quite a few people tend to dislike the constant comparisons between the likes of Diablo 4, Last Epoch, or Path of Exile, one fact remains undeniably consistent, and that is each of these games will continue to improve because of the competition between one another. That being said though, PoE really knows how to take that to another level. I mean, just look at the new Settlers of Calgar League, which came with a fairly large rework to Melee and a place called Kingsmarch, where you can build an entire town full of workers, send out ships on expeditions to bring back literal boatloads of loot, new crafting systems, and the list goes on. And I'm not the only one having a lot of fun this league.
And yet, welcome to Kingsmarch.
That is probably the most insane ARPG announcements I have ever seen.
Yo, I kind of like the town, by the way. First impressions of the town, like really kind of getting into it there and setting it up a little bit. That was kind of fun. Like that. It was definitely giving me the right vibe.
Even if we take a look at the recent Cycle 1.1 update for Last Epoch, which was incredible by the way. New bosses, a pinnacle boss challenge, more goals to chase in the endgame, new unique items, crazy fun new builds. I mean, listen, 11th Hour Games is doing fantastic work with Last Epoch, and it's been a blast to play. But I do think it's funny how the PoE devs are just like, oh, you added some cool new stuff? Let me just 10x that real quick. It's insane, and I love it. But I want to reiterate that this is a good thing for all these games, because now D4 is going to come back and try to one-up Path of Exile, which is going to snowball into Last Epoch trying to one-up D4, and this continuous competition between them is just going to keep these games feeling fresh and fun. Not to mention, each of these games will appeal to different types of gamers in general. Path of Exile is no doubt the place for the hardcore gamers. It's the most difficult of the three by far. And then Diablo 4 was clearly designed for more casual gamers. Hell, even people that don't play games can figure out Diablo 4 pretty quickly. And I think Last Epoch sits right in between the two and strikes a good balance between casual and hardcore. But there's one thing that I still can't quite figure out, and that's the campaigns in these games. I played through the Diablo 4 campaign once, and it was good, but I wouldn't want to play through it a second time, let alone over and over again, which is something you can't avoid in Last Epoch and Path of Exile. Now I have over 1,000 hours in PoE and roughly 500 hours in Last Epoch. I'm already kinda tired of the Last Epoch campaign. But for whatever reason, I'm still not sick of the campaign in Path of Exile. And I think a lot of that has to do with the design, format, and the pacing of PoE. For example, the campaign is very easy to follow. Each act has a very distinct look and atmosphere. You can actually see how the world is changing around you. The quests are pretty simple and rewarding. And most importantly, there are notable and iconic bosses and mini-bosses, which I believe is the foundation of why repeating the campaign every league doesn't feel tedious. If you're someone that has played Path of Exile quite a bit, I'm willing to bet that, just like me, every new character you run through the game with, you're trying to kill those bosses faster and faster, and you remember how slow or fast your last character did it. But that being said, I do really love the adventure mode that Diablo 3 started and Diablo 4 adopted. Being able to just jump into the game and not have to repeat the same old quests that you've already done however many times is honestly a huge quality of life that every ARPG game needs to have. Because a campaign in a seasonal game that you have to repeat over and over is essentially just an old school classic game design in a game that some of you may remember playing, Diablo 2. And back then, it was all you had. Like, there was nothing else that could bring even remotely the same experience to the table. I mean, you had Titan Quest, but it was just nowhere near as good. It was Diablo 2, and that's it. I remember my dad wouldn't let me and my older brother on the computer sometimes. And not because he was trying to get us to go outside or something ridiculous. No, it was so that my dad could play Diablo 2 on his infamous Barbarian X-Man. Which, to this day, he still gets emails from people wanting to duel his Barbarian. I've seen the emails, it's crazy. Like, he's the reason we started playing Diablo. And all we had at the time was one desktop PC that we would all have to take turns playing on. But when my dad took over the PC, me and my brother would go to the basement with a bunch of blank pieces of paper, and he would literally draw a character sheet for me, then cut out a bunch of pieces of paper where he would draw gear on, you know, armor, weapons. He would draw little monsters like Fallen, and chests, and gold. He was basically a D&D game master, but for Diablo 2. And so then he would hide all these all over the basement. You know, our basement was all concrete. And I would go around and try to find monsters to fight because, you know, underneath the monster piece of paper was a piece of gear that I could take back to my older brother and sell and buy new gear. Like, the game was just so good that even when we weren't allowed to play it at the time, we found our own way to play it. And Diablo is where my love for ARPG games started. You can tell the devs at GGG took inspiration from how great D2 was and took it to even greater heights in Path of Exile, where they have become the new standard for how an ARPG should be made. But after Diablo 2, Diablo 3 came out, and it kind of reached a broader audience and got more people invested into the universe of Diablo and ARPGs in general. But again, it was just Diablo 3 at the time. You weren't really alternating between your favorite ARPGs like you're able to today, until Path of Exile came into the scene. And now, all of a sudden, you could play a Path of Exile league, and when you got bored, you can jump over to the new Diablo 3 season. Then new and good ARPGs were coming out of the woodworks. You got Torchlight, Grim Dawn, which is an absolute gem, by the way. If you have never tried, or maybe you just looked at Grim Dawn and thought, graphics look kind of bad, nobody really plays it, I don't think I'll like it. Trust me, if Grim Dawn had the same graphic fidelity as D4 or PoE, and a better marketing team, to be honest, everybody would be playing it. But I'm getting a little off course here due to my love of Grim Dawn. The point I was getting to is that there are tons of ARPGs these days, and we are very lucky to have the 3 big ARPGs to bounce between throughout the year. And even though Diablo 2 is the godfather, and sort of where this all gained traction, I think Path of Exile alone is the reason games like D4 and Last Epoch are so good and keep improving. Because PoE set the bar so high that everyone is just clawing their way up to either meet that expectation or try to steal the crown from Path of Exile. But I think we all know it's safe to say PoE is and has been winning the hearts of diehard ARPG gamers like myself for a long time now. And they only really have one heir worthy of succession, and that's Path of Exile 2. But it's honestly a great time to be an ARPG fan. The new PoE League has been a blast, D4 Season 5 is right around the corner, followed by the massive new expansion coming later this year, and I'm sure Last Epoch will find a way to fit into all this madness. I mean, hell, let's not forget that Titan Quest 2 is also slotted for release this year. Too many awesome games to play with too little time. But that will do it for this video. Subscribe and leave a like. Thanks for chilling with me. I'm Manareth, and I'll be back. Peace.